At my daughter's wedding, I was not seated with the parents. I was not seated with the family. I was seated at a round table by the swinging kitchen doors, between my late husband's cousin, who couldn't hear out of his left ear, and a woman I had met once at a funeral and never again. The little card in front of my plate said Table 12, but one of the bridesmaids had already said the quiet part out loud. "Oh, that's the old relatives' table." Then my daughter Vanessa came over in her white satin gown, all pearls and perfume and practiced sweetness, pointed toward the chairs by the kitchen and said, "Old relatives sit there, Mom. You understand." I looked at her for a long second. This was the same girl whose braces I paid for by taking extra shifts at the hospital. The same girl whose college applications I typed at midnight because she said her hands were tired. The same girl whose father, Martin, had adored so fiercely that he started saving for her wedding before she was old enough to spell the word marriage. I could have made a scene. I could have said, "I am not an old relative. I am the mother of the bride." But I did not. I picked up my little place card, smiled, and walked to table 12 like a woman who had seen worse rooms than that one. The insult was bad enough. The part that came next was worse. Half an hour later, when the guests were busy with champagne and the photographer was arranging people like expensive furniture, Vanessa leaned close to me near the dessert table. Her smile stayed fixed for the cameras, but her voice dropped into the sharp little whisper she used when she was 7 and wanted something from me before her father noticed. "You're still paying for our honeymoon, right? Just like that? Not, 'Thank you for everything, Mom.' Not, 'I'm sorry about the table.' Not even, 'Can we talk?' Just, 'You're still paying.'" Her new husband, Caleb, was standing close enough to hear. I noticed him before she did. He had a glass of champagne in one hand, and the expression of a man realizing the wedding dress was not the only thing his bride had been wearing for show. I looked at my daughter. Then I looked at the ballroom, at the flowers I had not been asked to help choose, at the head table where my chair should have been, at the framed photo of Martin tucked behind the guest book like an afterthought, and I smiled. "Ask your father's estate," I said. Vanessa's face went white so fast I thought the foundation might slide right off her cheeks. Caleb turned toward her. "And that, as they say, is when the marriage really began." Welcome back to When Mom Snaps, where the woman they push to the back table is usually the one holding the receipt for the whole room. If you have ever been treated like an inconvenience by the very people who still had their hand out, stay with me. This one is for you. My name is Rose Whitaker. I am 69 years old, widowed for 3 years, and I spent 31 of those years as a night shift nurse. I have held dying hands at 3 in the morning. I have cleaned blood from hospital floors. I have told families the truth gently, when doctors used words they did not understand. So when people mistake quiet for weakness, I let them. It saves time. My daughter never understood that about me. Vanessa grew up loved. Not spoiled at first, though I suppose that depends on who you ask. Martin and I had one child, and we poured ourselves into her, the way parents do when they think sacrifice is just another word for love. Martin fixed used cars on weekends to pay for her dance classes. I worked Christmas Eve more years than I can count so she could wake up to presents under the tree. And Martin, my sweet, foolish, soft-hearted husband, believed Vanessa could do no wrong. "She's young, Rosie," he would say, whenever she forgot my birthday or borrowed money and never paid it back. "She'll grow out of it." She did not grow out of it. She grew better dressed. By the time she met Caleb, Vanessa had become the kind of woman who called herself low maintenance, while sending a 12-page wedding vision board to everyone involved. She wanted white orchids, imported champagne, a string quartet, a custom veil, and a coastal honeymoon that cost more than my first car. When Martin was alive, he used to joke that he had 2 retirement plans, me and Vanessa's wedding. After he died, I found out that was not entirely a joke. In the bottom drawer of his desk, inside a blue folder labeled "For Our Girl," Martin had left instructions. Bank papers, insurance documents, a small account he had built over 25 years, meant to help with Vanessa's wedding and the beginning of her married life. But Martin had also left one handwritten note on top. "Rose, if I am gone when she marries, you decide how this is used. Not Vanessa, not the groom. You. If our girl has become the woman we prayed she would be, give it with joy. If she has not, protect what is left. I read that note sitting on the floor beside his desk, still wearing the black dress from the funeral home. At the time, I thought he was being dramatic. By the night of the wedding, I understood he had been merciful, because the money Vanessa thought was already hers had never belonged to her. It belonged to Martin's estate, and legally, quietly, completely, I was the trustee. Vanessa did not know that. She knew there was money. She knew her father had saved. She knew I had paid deposits when she cried about vendors and deadlines and how embarrassing it would be if people thought we were cheap. What she did not know was that I had stopped paying 3 weeks before the wedding. Not because I was cruel, because I had finally opened my eyes, and the first thing that opened them was not the old relatives table. It was an email Vanessa accidentally sent to me instead of her wedding planner. The subject line said, "Final seating plus mom issue." That was the first little mercy. If Vanessa had written something sweet in the subject line, I might have opened it with my heart unguarded, but mom issue is not a phrase a daughter uses unless she has already stopped seeing her mother as a person. The email was meant for Elise, the wedding planner. Vanessa had forwarded the updated seating chart and written a note above it. "Elise, please keep my mom away from the head table. Caleb's parents are very formal, and I don't want the night to feel elderly or depressing. Dad's photo can stay near the guest book, but not too prominent. Mom keeps making everything about him, and it throws off the vibe." Then came the sentence that sat in my chest like a stone. "Also, please make sure she doesn't bring up the honeymoon payment in front of Caleb. He thinks we covered most of it ourselves." I read it once, then I read it again. Then I sat very still at my kitchen table while the refrigerator hummed and the late afternoon sun moved across the floor. I had cared for stroke patients who could only blink for yes or no. I had watched people take their final breaths with more dignity than my daughter had shown in that email. Not elderly. Not depressing, not too prominent. That was her father she was talking about, Martin, who had missed her wedding by 3 years and still somehow managed to help pay for the flowers, the dress deposit, the venue hold, and half the catering. I printed the email. That is what nurses do after too many years of charting. We document. Then I called Vanessa. She answered on the 4th ring, breathless and annoyed. "Mom, I'm in the middle of something." "I got an email from you," I said. There was a pause, a tiny one, but mothers hear tiny pauses. "What email?" "The one about the seating chart, and me being an issue." Silence. Then the laugh. Bright, fake, brittle. "Oh my God, Mom, that was not for you." "I gathered that. You're taking it wrong. I'm reading it exactly." She sighed, the way she used to sigh when I asked her to unload the dishwasher. "Look, weddings are stressful. Elise needed clear direction. Caleb's family is different from ours. Different from ours. Caleb came from money. Not old money, exactly, but polished money. His mother wore pearls to breakfast. His father owned commercial buildings and said things like legacy planning while holding a wine glass. I had met them twice. They were not unkind to me. A little cool, maybe, but no colder than the waiting room at a specialist's office. Vanessa, though, had decided they were the audience she had been preparing for her entire life. "And your father's photo?" I asked. Another pause. "Mom, Dad's gone." "I know that's hard for you, but this is my wedding. I don't want a memorial service with cake." I closed my eyes. There are sentences that cannot be unheard. They do not shout. They simply walk into a room inside you and sit down forever. "Your father saved for this wedding for 25 years, I said. "I know," she snapped, "and I'm grateful. But he would want me to have a beautiful day, not make everyone sad. Your father would want to be remembered. Then remember him," she said. "Just don't make it the theme." That was when something in me stopped begging. Not broke. Breaking is noisy. This was quieter than that. A thread cut clean. I looked across the kitchen at Martin's old chair, the one I still had not moved from the corner. For 3 years, I had spoken to him there sometimes. Little things. "The tomatoes are coming in. The Cardinals lost again. Your daughter picked ivory napkins after all." That day, I did not speak to the chair. I listened, and what I heard was Martin's handwriting from that blue folder. "You decide how this is used." So I did. The next morning, I called the travel company handling the honeymoon package. 10 nights in Santorini, private villa, sunset cruise, Couples massage, a price so absurd I had laughed the first time Vanessa sent it to me, thinking it was a joke. It had not been a joke. I asked for the account manager and gave my name. "Yes, Mrs. Whitaker," she said warmly. "We were expecting the final transfer next Friday." "No," I said. "You were expecting it from me. That transfer will not be coming." Her tone changed immediately, the way professional tones do when money leaves the room. "I see. Would you like to cancel the reservation?" "No. Leave it under Vanessa and Caleb's names. Send them the balance due notice directly." "Are you sure?" "I am." Then I called the florist and removed the extra arch Vanessa had added, after promising me it was included. I called the photographer and declined the second shooter she had told me was basically free. I called the venue and confirmed that every payment I had personally authorized was complete, and no further charges could be placed against my card. I did not cancel her wedding. That would have made me the villain. I simply stopped being the invisible wallet behind it. By noon, my phone started ringing. Vanessa. Then Vanessa again, then a text. "Mom, why is the travel company asking me for $18,700? Then another. "This is not funny." Then, "Dad would be ashamed of you." That one almost got me. Almost. I typed back one sentence. "Your father asked me to protect what was left." 3 dots appeared. Disappeared. Appeared again. Then my phone rang, and this time I answered. "You're punishing me," she said. No hello, no question, just the verdict. "No," I said, "I'm believing you." "What does that even mean?" "You said I was making everything about your father. You said Caleb thinks you covered most of the honeymoon yourselves." "So I'm stepping back and letting that be true." Her breathing sharpened. "Mom, don't do this 2 weeks before my wedding. You did it first, sweetheart. You just didn't think I'd read the memo." And for the first time in a long time, Vanessa had no pretty answer ready. For 2 weeks, Vanessa tried every door she knew. First came anger, then tears, then silence, then the old favorite, guilt wrapped in her father's name like a borrowed coat. Dad would never do this to me. I looked at that message for a long time, not because it hurt less the longer I stared at it, but because I wanted to answer the right daughter. The little girl who used to fall asleep on Martin's chest during Sunday football was still somewhere in there. I knew that. A mother always knows that, even when the woman standing in front of her has become very hard to love. But I also knew Martin, so I wrote back, "Your father did do this, Vanessa. He left the decision to me." That was the last thing I said about the money before the wedding. Not because Vanessa stopped asking. She did not. She called from the bridal salon. She called from the car. She called once at midnight, crying so loudly I could hear Caleb in the background asking what was wrong. "Don't you dare tell him," she hissed suddenly, her voice snapping dry. "Do not bring Caleb into this." That was when I understood the honeymoon was not the only lie. Caleb did not know I had paid for the wedding deposits. He did not know Vanessa had told vendors to send balances to me. He did not know she had described her father's estate as basically handled. He thought he was marrying a woman who had contributed to her own wedding like an adult. Instead, he was marrying a woman who had hidden the bill behind her widowed mother's back and smiled for engagement photos. I asked her one question that night. "Vanessa, does Caleb know where the honeymoon money was supposed to come from?" She went quiet. Then she said, "It doesn't matter. We're going to be married." That told me everything. A week before the wedding, Caleb came to my house. He stood on my porch in shirt sleeves, looking uncomfortable and polite, holding a small white bakery box like a peace offering. He had always been a courteous young man, a little too polished maybe, but decent in the eyes. Martin used to say you could tell a man by whether he looked at the server when he ordered. Caleb did. "Mrs. Whitaker," he said. "Do you have a minute?" I let him in. He had brought lemon squares from the bakery on Knox Street because Vanessa had told him they were my favorite. They were actually her father's favorite. Mine were almond cookies, but I did not correct him. Some mistakes are innocent. We sat at the kitchen table, and Caleb folded his hands like he was about to ask permission for something important. "Vanessa said there's been a misunderstanding about the honeymoon," he began. "A misunderstanding is when 2 people hear different things," I said. "This is more like one person not telling the truth." His face changed. "Not much. Just enough. What truth? There it was, the honest chance, arriving in a navy tie. I almost told him everything. I almost slid Martin's note across the table. The emails, the balance notice, the seating chart with my name penciled beside table 12. But then I remembered Vanessa's midnight whisper. Don't you dare tell him. A daughter should not put her mother in that position. A bride should not build her marriage on a secret and make her widow mother the wall hiding it. So I chose my words carefully. Caleb, I think there are financial things you and Vanessa need to discuss before Saturday. His jaw tightened. She said you offered to help. I did. And now you've withdrawn it. I have withdrawn access to money she was not honest about. He looked down at his hands. A good man will often understand half the truth before you finish telling it. A vain one will argue. Caleb did not argue. Is this about the wedding being too expensive? No, I said. It is about your wife thinking love means someone else pays quietly while she takes credit loudly. He closed his eyes for 1 second. Then he nodded once, thanked me for the lemon squares he had brought himself, and left. I watched him walk down the porch steps and felt no triumph, only sadness. Because here is something people do not say enough about family reversals. They are satisfying from the outside. From the inside, they are funerals for the version of someone you kept hoping would come back. The morning of the wedding, I put on a blue dress Martin had loved. Not navy, not black, blue. Vanessa had asked me months earlier not to wear anything too mother of the bride-ish because Caleb's mother had already chosen champagne silk and the photos needed balance. So I wore the modest blue dress with pearl buttons and sensible shoes, and I pinned Martin's wedding band to the inside seam, where no one could see it, but I could feel its weight when I moved. At the venue, everything was beautiful, painfully beautiful. White flowers hung from the arch. Candles floated in glass bowls. A harpist played softly near the entrance. There was a framed photo table with pictures of grandparents and childhood moments, but Martin's picture was not at the center. It was tucked near the back, half blocked by a floral arrangement, smiling out from behind eucalyptus like even in death he had been asked to make room. I moved the flowers. Not far. Just enough so his face could be seen. Elise the planner noticed and hurried over. Mrs. Whitaker, Vanessa wanted that arrangement angled that way. Vanessa wanted a great many things, I said. Elise opened her mouth, then seemed to think better of it. The ceremony was lovely. I will give her that. My daughter was a beautiful bride. When she walked down the aisle for one foolish second, I saw her at 6 years old wearing my slip as a veil, asking Martin if princesses had to pay taxes. Martin had told her, "The good ones do." I nearly laughed and cried at the same time. Then I looked at the empty space beside me where her father should have been, and I remembered why I was sitting alone. At the reception, I found my escort card. Table 12. By the kitchen. Old relatives. A cousin from Martin's side patted my arm and said, "At least we're close to the rolls." I smiled, because there is nothing else to do when humiliation comes dressed as logistics. Then Vanessa swept over, glowing for the room. "Mom, please don't make that face." "What face?" "The martyr face." I touched the place card between 2 fingers. I was just admiring the seating. She leaned close, perfume sharp and expensive. "Old relatives sit there, Mom. You understand. Caleb's parents are hosting important people at the front." Hosting. That was almost funny. I had paid the first venue deposit. Martin had paid for half the room from a grave, and my daughter had the nerve to call other people the hosts. Still, I did not argue. I sat at table 12. I ate dry chicken. I clapped during the speeches. I watched Caleb's father toast to families coming together in honesty and respect, and I watched Caleb look briefly, carefully, at his bride. He knew something now. Not all of it, but enough to be listening. The first dance ended. Champagne flowed. Guests began moving toward the dessert display, a ridiculous tower of sugar flowers and gold leaf that Vanessa had once cried over because I suggested a smaller cake. That was when she found me. She took my elbow with a bride's smile and a banker's fingers. "Mom," she whispered, "you're still paying for our honeymoon, right?" And there he was, Caleb just behind her shoulder, close enough to hear every word. I looked at my daughter, then at the man she had chosen to lie beside for the rest of her life. Then I gave her Martin's answer. Ask your father's estate. Her face drained white. Caleb's glass stopped halfway to his mouth. What estate? He said. Vanessa turned so quickly her veil slipped off one shoulder. Caleb, she said, with the laugh she used when a waiter brought the wrong wine. Not now. But Caleb was not looking at the veil or the champagne or the sugar flowers. He was looking at her. What estate? He asked again. There are moments at weddings when the whole room changes temperature. A glass breaks. A baby cries during vows. Someone gives a speech they should not give. People pretend not to notice, but their bodies know. Heads tilt. Conversations soften. The orchestra keeps playing, but the air has already shifted. This was one of those moments. Vanessa's hand tightened on my elbow, not affection. Warning, Mom is being dramatic, she said. She's upset about the seating. I looked down at her fingers on my arm. Take your hand off me, sweetheart. She did. Caleb stepped closer. Vanessa, what estate? The money my husband left, I said. The money your wife told you she and I had already worked out. The money she expected me to transfer for your honeymoon after seating me by the kitchen and hiding her father behind a flower arrangement. Mom, Vanessa snapped. Stop! No, I said. Not loudly. That was the thing. I did not raise my voice. I did not need to. A quiet no, spoken by a woman who has swallowed too many yeses, can cut through a ballroom better than a scream. Caleb looked at Vanessa. You told me the honeymoon was paid for. It was supposed to be, she said. By who? Her eyes flicked to me. There it was, the answer standing in the silence between us. Caleb let out a breath, small and stunned. Your mother? Vanessa's cheeks flushed now, pink over white. It was family money. No, I said. It was your father's money. And before he died, he left me in charge of deciding whether it should be used. That was when Caleb's mother appeared, Marjorie. Champagne silk, perfect posture, pearls at her throat. His father came with her, silver-haired and still as a judge. They had heard enough to know this was not cake-cutting trouble. Is there a problem? Marjorie asked. Vanessa smiled at her mother-in-law, and for 1 second I almost admired the performance. No, Rose is just confused. Confused. There it was. The family word people use when they want an older woman's truth to sound like a symptom. I reached into my purse. Vanessa saw the blue folder and froze. What is that? She whispered. Your father, I said. I opened it slowly. Inside were 3 things. Martin's handwritten note, the printed email Vanessa had sent by mistake, and a clean list of every wedding payment made from the account her father had left behind. I had not brought them to punish her. Not at first. I brought them because old nurses and old widows know something young brides do not. Always carry the chart. Caleb, I said, I am sorry this is happening today, truly. But since my daughter chose to ask me for almost $19,000 in front of you, I think you deserve the full answer in front of you, too. I handed him the payment list. He read it. Venue deposit, dress balance, catering installment, floral deposit, string quartet, cake deposit, bridal suite. His eyes moved down the page, slower and slower. Marjorie leaned in. So did her husband. Vanessa reached for the paper. Caleb moved it out of her hand without looking at her. You told me your father left money directly to you, he said. He did, Vanessa said quickly. Basically is doing a lot of work, I said. A sound moved through the little circle around us, not a laugh. Not exactly. More like a room realizing the bride's dress was not the only white thing at the wedding. I unfolded Martin's note. My hands shook then. Not from fear, from love. Paper remembers the people who touched it, and this paper still felt like my husband. Martin wrote this before he passed, I said. He knew our daughter. He loved her more than anyone in the world, but love did not make him blind. Vanessa's eyes filled with tears. But I knew those tears. They were not grief. They were calculation under pressure. Don't read that, she said. I looked at her then, really looked at her. At your wedding, I said, you hid your father's picture because it threw off the vibe. You lied to your husband about who was paying for this room. You seated your mother with the old relatives by the kitchen, then asked her to fund a luxury honeymoon like I was an envelope with legs. So yes, Vanessa, I am going to read what your father trusted me to remember." The string quartet stopped. I do not know if they meant to. Maybe the song ended. Maybe one of them had a mother too. I read only the part that mattered. Rose, if I am gone when she marries, you decide how this is used. Not Vanessa, not the groom. You, if our girl has become the woman we prayed she would be, give it with joy. If she has not, protect what is left. When I finished, nobody spoke. Vanessa cried harder, but still not the right way. "How could you do this to me?" she said. That sentence told Caleb more than my folder ever could. Not, "I'm sorry I lied." Not, "I miss Dad." Not, "Thank you, Mom." How could you do this to me? Caleb folded the payment list once and handed it back to me with both hands, as if returning something sacred. "Mrs. Whitaker," he said, voice tight, "how much of this wedding did you pay for?" I looked at my daughter. Then I told him the truth, enough that I should not have been seated by the kitchen. Marjorie closed her eyes. Caleb's father muttered something under his breath that sounded like shame, but not mine. Vanessa turned on me then. The mask slipped completely. "You're ruining my wedding." "No," I said gently. "I'm returning it to its rightful owner." "What does that even mean?" "It means the wedding is yours. The marriage is yours. The bills are yours. And the lie is yours too." Caleb looked at her. "Were you ever going to tell me?" Vanessa wiped under her eyes carefully, trying not to disturb the makeup. "After the honeymoon, maybe. When things calmed down. After I was already your husband." She said nothing, and in that silence the honeymoon disappeared. Not the island, not the villa, not the sunset cruise. Something much bigger. The version of Vanessa that Caleb thought he had married. He set his champagne glass on the nearest table. "I need a minute," he said. "Caleb, don't you dare walk away from me at our wedding." He looked back at her, and his face was not angry. That was worse, it was clear. "Vanessa," he said, "I think your mother has been paying for more than the wedding." Then he walked out through the side doors toward the garden. The ballroom watched him go. My daughter stood there in her perfect dress, surrounded by flowers her father had helped buy, finally understanding that humiliation can travel both ways. And I still had one more envelope in my purse. The envelope was cream-colored, soft at the edges, with Vanessa's name written across the front in Martin's careful block letters. I had carried it in my purse since the ceremony began, not because I knew I would need it, because I had hoped I would not. Vanessa saw it and went still. For 1 second, she looked very young. Not 34, not a bride. Not the woman who had called me depressing in an email and whispered about honeymoon money, with frosting still on her fork. Just young. "Is that from Dad?" she asked. "Yes." Her voice dropped. "Give it to me." "No," I said. The word landed harder than a slap because it was not angry. It was finished. Martin had written that envelope for the day Vanessa married. He had tucked it into the same blue folder as the account papers, with a note to me that said, "If the day is right, let her read this before she leaves for her honeymoon." The day was not right. Maybe someday it would be. "This letter," I said, "was meant for a daughter who understood what her father gave. Not just the money, the years, the weekends, the back pain, the used tires he sold so you could have new shoes for school pictures. The man who kept a jar of honeymoon brochures on his desk because he wanted you to see somewhere beautiful after you promised your life to someone." Vanessa's mouth trembled. Around us, the wedding had gone quiet in patches. Some guests pretended to look elsewhere. Others had given up pretending. The old relatives' table by the kitchen watched with the steady attention of people who had spent their lives being underestimated and recognized the sound of a bill finally coming due. "You can't keep Dad from me," Vanessa whispered. "I'm not keeping him from you," I said. "I'm keeping you from using him." That broke something in her face. Not enough to make her sorry, enough to make her understand she had lost the room. Marjorie stepped forward then, surprising me. She looked at Vanessa, not cruelly, but with the kind of disappointment that does not need volume. "Did you tell Caleb his honeymoon was being funded by your mother?" Vanessa said nothing. Caleb's father picked up his champagne glass, set it down untouched, and said, "I think we should give our son space." That was all. But in families like theirs, that was a thunderclap. Vanessa turned back to me, desperate now. "Mom, please, people are watching." I looked around the ballroom, the flowers, the candles, the cake, the chair I had not been given, Martin's photograph, finally visible behind the guest book. "Yes," I said, "they are." Then I placed the cream envelope back inside my purse. "Here is what happens now. The wedding expenses already paid are done. I won't embarrass the vendors, and I won't turn your reception into a collection notice. But the honeymoon is yours to pay for or cancel. The remaining money your father left will not be used for luxury trips, image, or rescue. I am placing it into a family education fund for any future grandchildren, with rules so tight even grief can't loosen them." Vanessa stared at me. "You'd give it to children who don't even exist instead of me?" I smiled sadly. "Your father started that money for the future. Tonight, you showed me you are not ready to hold it." For once, she had no answer. Caleb did come back 20 minutes later. He did not return to the head table. He came to me first, out by the side hallway where I had gone to breathe. "I'm sorry," he said. "You didn't seat me." "No," he said. "But I believed a version of things because it was easier. That reminded me of my Martin, and it softened me a little." "Be careful with easy," I told him. "It sends very expensive bills." He almost smiled. The reception continued, because weddings are machines once they start. Cake was cut, music played. People danced with the stiffness of guests who know they will be talking about this in their cars for years. Vanessa smiled for photos with red eyes and a grip on her bouquet tight enough to bruise stems. The honeymoon was canceled 2 days later. I know because the travel company sent me the notice by mistake, still thinking I was the contact. Caleb and Vanessa did not separate immediately. Life is rarely that theatrical. But they postponed the legal filing of their marriage license until after counseling. That was Caleb's condition. Honesty before paperwork. I respected him for that. Vanessa did not speak to me for 6 weeks. Then one afternoon she came to my house without makeup, without perfume, without the sharp little voice. She stood on my porch holding a grocery store bouquet, the kind Martin used to bring me on Fridays because roses from the gas station still count if the man means them. "I'm not here for money," she said. "That is a good first sentence," she cried then. Real tears this time. Ugly ones, humbled ones, the kind that do not check the mirror. "I hated that you looked poor to them," she said. "Caleb's family, his friends. I hated that Dad was gone. I hated that you looked sad. And I turned all of that into being ashamed of you." It was not a perfect apology. Perfect apologies are for movies. But it was a true beginning. I let her in. We sat at the kitchen table where I had printed the email that changed everything. I made tea. She did not ask about the envelope, that mattered. Months passed. Vanessa and Caleb stayed married, though not easily. They went to counseling. They paid for a small weekend trip themselves and called it a honeymoon, which I thought was the first sensible thing they had done. She sent handwritten thank you notes to every vendor whose balance her father had helped pay. She wrote one to me too. I kept it. As for Martin's letter, it is still in the blue folder. Someday, when Vanessa has learned to remember her father without reaching for his wallet, I will give it to her. Not before. Love is not the same as access. A mother can forgive and still hold the key. And me? I moved Martin's photograph from the hallway into the living room where the afternoon light hits it. I joined a card group at the library. I bought myself the almond cookies no one remembers are my favorite. And when family gatherings happen now, I do not sit where someone points. I sit where I belong, so that is my story. One wedding, one old relative's table, one honeymoon bill, and a daughter who learned that you cannot hide your mother in the corner and still expect her to fund the view. Have you ever been treated like an afterthought by someone who still expected your help? Have you ever had family make you feel small until they needed your money, your time, or your sacrifice? Tell me your opinion in the comments. If you enjoyed this story, please leave a like and subscribe, because it encourages the channel to keep bringing you new stories like this one. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.